Today, we're going to unpack the story of one of the 20th century's most transformative and controversial figures, a man who didn't just lead a revolution, but who designed a whole new kind of state from the ground up, completely reshaping a nation and really the entire world around it. We're talking about Ayatollah Khomeini. Just look at this scene. It's Tehran, November 4th, 1979. Young, revolutionary students are literally scaling the walls of the U.S. Embassy. This single chaotic act is the flashpoint for a crisis that will go on to define the relationship between two powerful nations for the next half-century. For 444 agonizing days, 52 American diplomats and citizens were held hostage, trapped inside their own embassy. This wasn't some backroom negotiation. It played out night after night on television screens all over the world. It was a daily, grinding humiliation for a global superpower. So you have to ask yourself, how on earth did it come to this? Was this just a spontaneous explosion of revolutionary anger, or was there something else going on, something more calculated? That is the big question we're going to dig into right now. Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to start with the immediate trigger, the one event that really lit the fuse on this whole international standoff. So, in October of '79, the U.S. makes a decision that changes everything. It allows the exiled Shah of Iran, a deeply despised figure, into the country for cancer treatment. Now, for the Iranian revolutionaries, this wasn't some kind of humanitarian act. No way. It felt like a terrifying replay of 1953, when the CIA actually staged a coup to put that very same Shah in power. They were convinced history was about to repeat itself, so a group of students took matters into their own hands, seizing what they famously called a den of espionage. But here's the thing. As important as those students were, they weren't the main character in this story. To really understand what happens next, we have to turn to the revolution's chief architect, the man whose face was already on posters hanging outside those embassy walls, Ayatollah Khomeini. You really can't overstate how massive the change Khomeini brought about was. It's just staggering. Before 1979, Iran was this key U.S. ally, right? A Western-friendly monarchy, a pillar of American strategy in the Middle East. After Khomeini takes over, it becomes America's #1 enemy, an Islamic theocracy built on a foundation of anti-imperialism. This wasn't just swapping out one leader for another, it was a total reinvention of a country's entire identity. And this, right here, this was at the absolute core of how he saw the world. For Khomeini, global politics wasn't some complex dance of diplomacy. Not at all. It was a simple black and white struggle. On one side, you have the oppressed peoples of the world, the Mustafin, and on the other, their imperialist oppressors, the Mustakbirin. This stark worldview would shape every single decision he made. He basically just took the whole Cold War chessboard and threw it out the window. The United States was, of course, famously labeled the Great Satan, but he wasn't picking sides. He called the Soviet Union the Lesser Satan. His one single guiding principle was this idea of istiqlal, or Islamic independence, a complete and total break from all foreign domination. Didn't matter if it was capitalist or communist. Now, his path to power was a long one. It wasn't an overnight thing. After getting arrested for blasting the Shah back in 1963, he was exiled a year later. But for the next 15 years, he used his time away brilliantly. From his base in Iraq, he'd record these sermons on simple cassette tapes. Those tapes would then be smuggled into Iran, copied thousands of times and passed from person to person, creating this massive underground network. He became this almost mythical symbol of resistance. So when he finally flew back to Iran in February 1979, he wasn't there to start a revolution. He was arriving to lead one that was already boiling over. But here's the crucial part. Khomeini didn't just want to get rid of the Shah. He had a very specific and pretty radical vision for what would come next. A state that would be governed entirely by Islamic principles. Okay, so at the very heart of this new system is this concept, Velayat-e Faqih. It's a mouthful, I know, but stick with me. It basically boils down to this. The ultimate authority in the country shouldn't be a president or a king. It should be the most qualified Islamic legal scholar, a guardian who can interpret God's law and make sure the entire government is running according to those principles. And this is the system he actually built. And it's a really unique hybrid. On one hand, you have elections. There's a president, a parliament, but look at what's sitting on top of them. You've got the Guardian Council, an unelected group of clerics and lawyers who can veto any law they don't like and block anyone from running for office. And above them all, at the very top, is the supreme leader, who was, of course, Khomeini himself. He had the final say on everything. So while it looks a bit like a republic, it's really a theocracy at its core. Okay, so now that we have all that background, let's circle back to those students on the embassy walls. Because what Khomeini did next shows that for him, the hostage crisis wasn't a problem he needed to solve. No, it was an opportunity. The perfect opportunity. So the students might have started this thing, but Khomeini jumped on it, and fast. He gave the takeover his official blessing, and just like that, he turned a chaotic student protest into official state policy. Why would he do that? Because it was a brilliant political move. It helped him achieve 3 critical goals for his brand new republic. First up, it was a way to lock down his power at home. See, the revolution wasn't just one group. It was a messy coalition of Islamists, liberals, leftists. The crisis created a simple, brutal political test. Are you with the revolution, standing up to the great Satan, or are you a moderate who wants to negotiate? The prime minister at the time, a moderate named Bazargan, resigned in protest, and that left Khomeini's clerical faction in total, undisputed control. Goal number 2 was all about identity. Nothing brings a country together like a common enemy. The hostage crisis became the ideological glue for the new Iran, cementing anti-Americanism as a core part of its identity. It was a powerful message to the entire world. We are the leaders of a new kind of anti-imperialist movement, one that's grounded in our faith. And finally, goal number 3, take America off the board. By holding hostages for 444 days, Iran didn't just challenge a superpower, it humiliated it on the world stage. This was an absolute PR nightmare for the Carter administration. It made it almost impossible for the U.S. to intervene directly, which is exactly what Khomeini wanted. It was his way of ensuring there would be no repeat of the 1953 coup. It was a declaration of total independence. Now, the hostages did eventually get released, but the damage was done. That crisis kicked off what you could basically call a 40-year Cold War between Iran and the West, and the consequences of that conflict have rippled across the entire globe. And you can see how this sent shockwaves around the world, but in totally different ways depending on who you were. The Sunni monarchies like Saudi Arabia were terrified. They were afraid Iran would try to export its revolution to their people. But for many Islamic revivalists around the world, Khomeini became a hero for standing up to the West. And for the big world powers, well, it just meant a new, unpredictable, and seriously destabilizing force had just shown up in one of the most important regions on Earth. So when you look back, the whole crisis is like a balance sheet with 2 very different columns. From a Khomeini's perspective, it was a huge success. He secured his power, he broke America's influence, and he forged a powerful new identity for his revolution. But the cost for the Iranian people has been enormous. Decades of being isolated on the world stage, crippling economic sanctions, and a seemingly never-ending conflict with the West. And that really brings us to the big question, the one historians still debate today. Was this a calculated masterstroke of revolutionary strategy, a move that cemented a revolution against all odds? Or was it a reckless gamble that bought a short-term victory at the terrible price of long-term isolation for an entire nation? The answer, just like the man himself, is still incredibly complex.